Roger up, I think.
Yeah, he's here. He's in the meeting now, Chair.
Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Stall River Regional Hospital District to order. Recognize that the meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people who have lived here since time immemorial. My agenda shows election of the chair, but for some reason I have an old agenda.
Yes.
We need to elect a chair, having done it before.
Yeah, so historically the chair of the regional hospital district is also the chair of the committee of the whole. We don't need to do that.
That's great. I think we've got an adoption of the agenda. So the agenda has been circulated. Have a motion, Director McCormick. Have a seconder to accept the agenda, Director Gisborne. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried unanimously. Now we're down to the minutes of the Regional Hospital District Committee of the Whole meeting September 8th, 2022. Motion, any errors or omissions that anybody has?
Adopt the minutes.
Adopt the minutes. Do I have a seconder? Dr. McCormick, any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. We have no delegations or inquiries. We have no unfinished business. One item of correspondence from Mr. Adrian, the Minister of Health. Are we remaining trained and considering that? Is any business coming out of that?
No.
Nice to know that you're working on it. So the name change is progressing down the road. And the next item is the Regional Hospital District Provisional Budget. Do we have staff members to go through this? Ms. Greenan, would you like to talk us through what we have in the provisional budget, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, Section 23 of the Hospital District Act provides that the board must, by bylaw, before January 1st, prepare and adopt a provisional budget bylaw. So this bylaw, as proposed, is the provisional budget for the 2023 Regional Hospital District. And I do have a short presentation, if I could, to share my...
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just getting it set up here. Okay, if everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, in this presentation, I'll go over the assumptions that were used in developing this provisional budget. The proposed annual operations for 2023, annual equipment grant that VCH generally requests, some information about the Willingdon Creek Village, and the VCH capital cost share requests. We've received a capital cost share request in 2021 and we received a further request in 2022. And the board has approved adding that to the 2023 budget. Then I'll review the reserve fund contribution for both the Section 20 reserve and the Willingdon Creek Village maintenance reserve, and then the projected residential tax rates. For operational costs, the costs are mainly for the Abbotsford Street site, and then just general potential legal fees, professional fees for operation of the hospital district. Return on investments are estimated at 2%. We may get more than that, but we just want to be on the on the conservative side, so we're banking on 2%. The cost share borrowing is projected at 5%. The Municipal Finance Authority is currently projecting 10-year rates at 3.76%, and the cost share borrowing the 2021 cost share request is borrowed over 10 years. And we're projecting that the 2022 cost share request will be borrowed over 5 years. That's what's recommended. So the 5% rate should be adequate, and we probably would come in a bit lower than that. Tax rates are all expressed as a residential tax rate per 100,000 of net taxable value, and the tax rates are all computed on the 2022 completed roll values. Actual tax rates will be based on the 2023 revised roll values when those are available. And the 2022 actuals that you see in this plan are all projections to December 31st. We've done projections rather than just actuals, as the Hospital District Act requires us to estimate what the annual surplus will be. So we've done projections so that we can make that estimate. For annual operations, we have the Arbutus Street building, and there are no costs projected in 2023 because it continues to be leased to Miclat Recovery Society. So they are covering all of the costs to operate that building. The Abbotsford Street site maintenance, we have a $5,000 budget in there just in case we need to do some debris removal, tree pruning, etc. on the lands surrounding that Abbotsford Street site. So that would only be if those costs are incurred, and it's hard to say if there will be any costs incurred on that in 2023 or not. Legal fees, we have a $15,000 budget just in case it's required throughout the year. Professional fees as well, there's a $10,000 budget in case any professional fees are required to be incurred throughout the year. And insurance is projected to increase by 10%. The actual insurance rates will be known closer to renewal date, which is in July. Vancouver Coastal Health cost share requests. That's note 3 on the provisional budget. And there was a 40% cost share request approved in 2021, and that meant borrowing of $2.687 million. To date, $1.5 million has been drawn down on that borrowing. So what you see in note 3 is that the balance of that cost share request coming forward. And then in 2022, the board approved a further cost share request of $791,756. So that is being added to the 2023 cost share request total. Williamton Creek Village, there are annual lease revenues of $1.192 million from Vancouver Coastal Health, and debt payments will continue until 2034. And the interest rate that has been set is 3.30%, and that will reset in 2024. So the rate right now is uncertain. Note 11, there's $240,000 placed annually into a reserve for building envelope maintenance. And that is for the Regional Hospital District to upgrade or maintain the envelope and the exterior of the Williamton Creek Village building. And the maintenance reserve is estimated at $2.27 million at the end of 2023. So this reserve can be used if anything is needed so that we don't have to incur borrowing to do any upgrades. The reserve fund, the main reserve, noted as note 10, has a recommended contribution of $200,000 annually plus the actuarial gain on the debt. So $100,000 of that contribution is to fund a potential minor equipment cost share request from Vancouver Coastal Health. We haven't had a request in a couple of years, but they could make a request, as it was quite customary for them to make a request in the past between $75,000 and $100,000 a year. And that is for equipment needs for the Powell River General Hospital, needs between $5,000 and $100,000. If the funds aren't used for the contribution, we can put them aside for future contributions. And the big plan for those funds is to mitigate the risk of an interest rate increase in 2024. So if the interest rate does increase significantly, we could use those funds to pay down the Willingdon Creek Village debt. And that would split the loan and mean lower interest costs going forward. And then if it isn't used to reduce the debt, then it could also be accessed for asset renewal, replacement, or upgrade of the Willingdon Creek Village in the future. So further considerations is, as Vancouver Coastal Health noted in their last presentation, there has been a historical lack of investment in Vancouver Coastal Health's infrastructure, and they're in a break-fix situation. What this means is that the board should expect ongoing capital cost share requests, and we will have more certainty around how much funding we'll have available in the reserve fund once the interest rates resets in 2024. As far as tax rates, what this change means is a tax requisition of 1.326 million for 2023. And as far as tax rates, that would mean a residential tax rate of $17.21 for the regional hospital district, excluding Tla'amin, and Tla'amin would expect a $10.21 rate per 100,000. And the reason there's a difference in the tax rate is when Tla'amin achieved treaty, their letters patent outline that they are not to contribute to any debt associated with decisions that were made before they achieved treaty. And so the debt that we have is the Willingdon Creek Village debt, so they don't contribute to anything to do with that debt. So their rate is lower than the rest of the district. And then what this means for an average home is within the greater regional district, $88.89 based on an average value of $516,655. And within the Tla'amin Nation, $52.75 per average home. Just to give the directors some context around those tax rates, the tax rates are projected at $17. So we did a review of the residential tax rates in other districts in 2019. We haven't updated that review, but that does put us around 8th on the list at $17. So as you can see here, the tax rates range. There's quite a wide range of them, and that all depends on what kind of infrastructure is in that district and also how they are putting funds aside for future. So the tax rates in other districts range from $3.07 in the Sea to Sky Hospital District to $137.25 per $100,000 in Stewart and Achako. So an average is $34.98. So we are quite, still on the lower end of the scale as far as our tax rates in comparison to other districts. So I'll stop the share now and just open the floor for any questions.
Questions? Mr. McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I have a question about the debt that we're carrying for the cost share request. To me, Chair, that isn't sustainable. They request things of us, we go out and borrow the money, but we can't just keep doing that. So my question is there a limit? Are we going to continue to borrow money to meet cost share requests, or is this kind of it?
Well, I think I'm going to try to answer that. The CAO can respond if he likes or add into it. So these are cost share requests we get from Vancouver Coastal Health, and we see one pretty much every year. They tend to come closer and closer to the finalization of our own budget, but it is for expenses that Vancouver Coastal Health believes need to be invested in the assets that we have. And we have the choice as a board either to agree to fund those or not to agree. And that's a choice of the board. Vancouver Coastal Health requests what they think they need to maintain the grounds and the facilities. And we make a decision either to provide the funding or we don't. I think we've seen some increases over the last couple of years, but from my own recollection, when we recall last year's discussions about Vancouver Coastal Health budget, I think they wanted to put more into the hospital's site than they ended up doing in their budget. And I think we can expect some increases and requests for funding that are higher than the ones we've had in the last couple of years. But I believe it's a board decision whether we fund those or not. Maybe the CIO can correct me if I'm wrong.
Through the chair, no need to correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Greenan, for your presentation. In your presentation, you mentioned the amount that we have in reserve. I kind of missed that in terms of writing it down, but I seem to recall it was a fair bit higher than the amount that's listed in item 8.2 on our agenda, which is for our revenue anticipation. And I understand why we do revenue anticipation and all that stuff. I'm curious though, when we do short-term borrowing for revenue anticipation, I presume that comes with some kind of interest cost to the organization. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible to use our reserves as, you know, the source of funds for revenue anticipation, and then we could top those up when we do get that funding coming in? I'm just curious if that's a possibility or if we're absolutely hands off on those reserves. Thank you. I'm sure our manager of financial services will enlighten me. So it's a question to Ms. Greenan through the chair. Thank you.
Ms. Greenan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Although we've put the revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw in place, we don't actually borrow those funds from the bank. It's a legislative requirement that we have the resolution in place. So we don't actually incur interest on the revenue anticipation borrowing.
Okay, thank you very much. That answers my question. No further questions, Chair.
Councillor Elliott. Director Elliott.
I'll answer to both. Thank you, Chair. So I'm kind of new to the hospital board, but so I do have a few questions that relate to just understanding what we're responsible for versus the Vancouver Coastal Health. And then I also had a question that's just financial management, and I'll start with the financial management one. I've noticed we're estimating interest rates a little on the high side. We're putting into the budget things we may or may not do and have not spent in the past. I'm wondering if we risk manage those a little bit and come up the middle on some of those, and some are under and some are over, if we couldn't lower our overall amount that we're budgeting for taxes. And if we happen to be wrong and everything's high, because I understand we're guessing conservative. I don't think everything will be high, but I think if we happen to be wrong and everything comes high, can we not mitigate that with our reserves?
Did you hear the question, Ms. Greenan?
Yes, thank you, Chair, through the chair. The estimates that we have in the budget are, we are projecting that we'll have $138,311 surplus in 2022. So the surplus isn't really that significant overall. And then any money that goes into the reserve, we can use to reduce the potential risk of a debt interest rate increase on the large debt of the Wellington Creek Village. So that is why we continue to put money aside into the reserve. We want to be prepared to mitigate that risk. If we don't use those funds to mitigate the risk, the concern is that when we go to renew the debt, if it's significantly higher, we could have significant interest rate increases.
So those conservative approach to the budget that will get us extra tax dollars saved away for the future, so we don't have to have such an increase in tax rates later on to make up for something that you expect will happen.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
just, if I could explain a little bit further.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Better
Thank you.
explanation, the better.
Thank you, through the chair. So with the Willingdon Creek Village, we do have Vancouver Coastal Health will be leasing that facility for a further 10 years. They'll be leasing it until 2034. And the thought is that they will lease it past that date. But in 2034, the debt will be fully paid out. And then at that point, we should be able to reduce the requisition significantly, potentially to, you know, almost nothing, because we will have the lease revenues coming in, but we won't have the large debt payments anymore.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, now a follow-up question.
So yeah, so the second part of my question was to do with when you say we're at the breaking point for a lot of things, and so that's why we're expecting more change requests in the future, or share requests rather. Which parts of the buildings are we required to share for or bear responsibility for, and which parts are the operating parts of the equipment? So with all the equipment they use, beds and everything part of what we share in, or is it simply the walls, structure, water, that kind of stuff?
Green.
Thank you, Chair. That question is probably best directed to the CAO.
I'd like to try that one out.
I'll give a stab at it, Chair. Thank you. Through the chair, the current Willingdon Creek Village Agreement does have some specified areas that we need to be aligned with VCH. And it outlines what their day-to-day operational expenses are. Interestingly enough, we own both Willingdon Creek Village and the hospital, but we don't have an agreement with regard to leasing the hospital. Nobody can find one.
Tremendous effort.
So it would be, I think, prudent that as the landlord, we should participate in some of the physical type of renewals that VCH is experiencing. But barring no lease agreement, that's maybe up for grabs or discussion. We do, however, have what I usually refer to as a tripart agreement with VCH, which includes ourselves, Sea to Sky Regional Hospital District, as well as the Sunshine Coast Regional Hospital District. And that is a agreement whereby, I'll read the section here. The RHDs are responsible on a voluntary basis for providing funding based on a cost-shared formula to VCH for capital expenditures defined hereinafter to include capital facility maintenance, construction, the minor major equipment and clinical information technology projects within their respective boundaries in accordance with the Hospital District Act. So again, it might be it's not as tight as maybe one would like, but it does state that we should be able to negotiate with VCH, or they come to us to negotiate, us to consider funding some of those entities. But I think the key phrase here is that it's all voluntary, so we don't have to fund them if we do not want. And that falls back to the original question by Director McCormick. So we do have a little bit of an outline as to what we can expect from VCH. I think there's maybe an innate obligation for some things, but other than that, it's pretty much all on a voluntary basis. And I can provide a historical nature that there have been years past where we have not offered funding. And if I'm not mistaken, one of them was the nurses station or the med dispenser, something of that nature.
So well, my take on the answer CAO has just given us is that the cost request shares requests we get from Vancouver Coastal Health are generally for capital projects that go into maintenance, expansion, or additions to buildings. And we have the choice to either accept or reject those. And to go a little further on it, the CAO has been working with the other regional hospital districts, as I have been asking to do for a couple of years, to try to get us getting regional hospital districts, particularly on the lower Sunshine Coast, working together with us, so we have a little bit more negotiating power with Vancouver Coastal Health to get them to smooth the requests and have them more equal over years and have things come along less suddenly. But that's what we're looking for. We get requests from Vancouver Coastal Health. We make our choices about how to fund them, whether we're going to fund them or not, and they end up here on the tax requisition list. Any more questions?
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Okay. Good, good reminder of what it is we do here. So we have a motion for the provisional budget. Would anybody like to move that motion? Do I have a seconder? Dr. Brander, any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. I want to say thank you to the staff for all of the clear explanations and answers there. Then we get to our regional hospital district revenue anticipation resolution. Would you like to introduce that to us, Mr. Newman? Do you have any more to say? Don't know if you heard me or not. Would you like to introduce the revenue anticipation resolution with any information you have?
Sorry, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yes. So this is the revenue anticipation resolution that we are required to adopt prior to January 1st. And this provides us the ability to borrow for our debt payments until our requisition is received on August 1st. And as I said, we don't actually enact the borrowing through the bank, so we don't incur interest on that borrowing. But it is a legislative requirement to have this resolution adopted.
Any questions from anyone? No? Would somebody like to move the motion? Director Brander, seconded by Director Elliott. Any discussion? Don't see any hands. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. We are at the Regional Hospital District interim financial statements to November. Ms. Greenan, what words of wisdom do you have to tell us about that?
Thank you, Chair. Just that there are no concerns with the Regional Hospital District financial statements year to date.
Any questions from anyone around the table? Somebody like to move the motion in front of us? Director Elliott, seconded by Director Fall. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Now, where did all the money go? Regional Hospital District Audit Services Plan. Ms. Greenan, what do you have to say about this, if anything?
Thank you, through the chair. Just one thing to note with this audit service plan is we do have there is a new requirement, as I've noted in the discussion section, and that is a revised assurance standard that the auditors have to review, and that is going to be a lot more work for them. But in this case, our auditors think that they can use our answers to the CATHAT regional districts CAS 315 questions and apply them to the regional district because it's the same governing body. And therefore, they don't anticipate any additional cost to the hospital district for that extra assurance.
Okay, any questions? Don't see any hands. Would somebody like to move the resolution? Director McCormick. Have a seconder? Director Fall, I keep missing his hand. You're right out of the corner of my eye when I'm here.
Okay, yeah, I'll hold it there.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. We have no new business. We're in a question period. Is there anyone from the press who has a question?
I'm here, Chair. Thank you very much. I don't have any questions this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Galinsky. Anyone in the audience have any questions? Got a crowd here. Don't see any questions. So that being done, we have no in-camera session. The adjournment has happened. We are adjourned.